The Mid-America Veterans Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. The museum would not exist without the donations of our generous community. Your donations ensure the museum continues to share and preserve the stories of our veterans. Would you like to be part of something special? To donate, visit mavm.org and click on Donate. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only. The primary purpose of the Operation Insight podcast is to educate. The views, information, or opinions expressed on the Operation Insight podcast are solely the views of the individuals or guests involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Operation Insight does not accept responsibility for their views or comments. The Operation Insight podcast may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence, severe mental illness, sex, drugs, and alcohol addiction. You are advised to refrain from watching or listening to the Operation Insight podcast if you are likely to be offended or adversely impacted by any of these topics. Neither the company, host, director, or the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction. Welcome to the Operation Insight podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum with your host, Jason Galvin, and co-host, Sergeant Ethan Gross. Well, welcome back, family, to the museum. Today in studio, we have a special guest, Master Sergeant Leonor Branch, who served in the U.S. Air Force from 2002 to 2022, and is also the founder of Sisters in Service of Greater St. Louis, a nonprofit, in 2024. Welcome back, Ethan. Go ahead and kick us off.
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's a real honor to have Master Sergeant Branch on today. I always enjoy speaking to veterans who are active community leaders and stakeholders in their community. And Master Sergeant Branch is one of those individuals as the founder of the Greater St. Louis branch of Sisters in Service. She's very active with the honor flights that take place out of St. Louis. And she's just a great representation of a female veteran in all ways. So thanks for being here. Let's start by telling the audience about yourself and where you come from.
Yeah, thank you so much for those kind words. The honor is all mine, in all honesty, being able to come in a space where I can share my story. It really took me down memory lane, even though I did retire after 20 years and I thought about my service. Being able to come onto this podcast and just breaking it into segments of where I've been, what it's done for me as a person as a whole, I'm just so excited and honestly just really humbled to be here. And for starters, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Chicago, on the northwest side of Chicago, where, as you can imagine and as you can hear, Chicago is known for its beautiful buildings and city skyline, but it's also known for its violence and gang activity. And that was a lot of what I had in my surroundings growing up. I remember as a child playing out in the playgrounds and being caught in drive-bys, something that as a child no one should ever go through. But it was so normal. I was still very fearful as a child and playing with my sister. I'm the oldest. We're about 6 years apart. And I just remember running from drive-bys, and it didn't happen just once. It didn't happen just twice. It was a way of living. And so I grew up in that environment all the way to high school. And even in my high school, I remember there being metal detectors that we needed to walk through. And that was before active shooting was as popular, I guess you can say, as it is now. But I didn't see anything strange or wrong with it. That was all I knew. A little bit more about me is my parents immigrated from Mexico. And that makes me second generation immigrant. I've never really said that. Again, using this space to really look back at my roots, where I've come from, how I joined the military, which I'm excited to share, and just seeing how my family started their lives from scratch. Seeing firsthand the grind, especially for my mom. She was the oldest out of the 7 siblings. And seeing her through her struggles as a single mom. It was just me and my sister. But living in a small apartment in Chicago, living pretty poorly, crammed in, like I mentioned, a small apartment, the 7 of them, me, my sister. It was, again, something that we really didn't know anything other than that's what was given to us. Mm-hmm. That was our opportunity, something better than what my mom and my uncles, my tias, my tios were brought up in Mexico. This was a chance of that dream. And so I see my mom as my hero. She, like I mentioned, as the oldest, and watching her day-to-day grinding, not ever taking a day off, wearing the hat as a mom and a dad and a mom to her siblings. That's really where the grind started for my foundation and upbringing.
I always want to take opportunities like this when they come. And Jason, I think you agree. First of all, Lenore, you've presented yourself in a fantastic way, and I so appreciate you being prepared to speak on your early upbringing. But I would very much like to hear about the story of your parents and them immigrating and then meeting and starting a family and why they chose Chicago and all those things. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your interest in that area specifically. I honestly don't know why Chicago. I had that question asked to me while I was in the service. First, I would say what nationality I am, and the first question was, why so high up north? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I believe we had other family members that had already immigrated, and that was just a comfort place and city where we knew someone. And my mom, she immigrated with my dad at one point. And she left a couple of her siblings, and she started off a new life here, but she couldn't stop thinking of those siblings. And just imagine the risk, right, that we know, that we hear so many tragedies trying to follow that dream. She crossed over a few times until she gathered the entire family in the United States to live that dream. If that's not courageous and brave in itself, I remember one time I went to Mexico for a year where my mom and my dad were trying to figure things out. And I went through sort of what kindergarten is here. And I was happy. I felt the freedom. I felt safe. And I almost immigrated in the same way that my mom and my dad did, even though I was born in the United States. And I just couldn't believe that my mom handed me over to someone through Los Angeles to get me here. And then she would just meet me in the U.S. And I'm like, Mom, what could have happened of me? And you could have never seen me again. And she said, she cried and she prayed, and that's something that she just felt in her heart that she needed to do to have us all together again. So there was many back and forth, but it was something that my mom couldn't live with, knowing that her family wasn't all together. And we're very big on family and traditions, and we all thank her for it, because at the end of the day, we rise together.
Yeah. It sounds like your mom had an incredible amount of trust and faith in what she was doing or trying to do for the family. You know, we're a nation of immigrants. We've had Sergeant Jorge Valdez on, and he did a fantastic job of telling his story. And so that's why I wanted to ask you about the specifics of that, Lenore. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I always want to celebrate stories like that, because
Absolutely.
To me, it's truly mind-boggling that Leonor's parents came over. She's second generation, and she did 20 years in the United States Air Force.
Yeah.
Courageously served, selflessly served, and now she's continuing to serve in the community. So I applaud you and your parents in the decision and the hardships they had to endure.
Thank you.
Okay, so raised in Chicago, Cubs fan, I assume, based off location.
If my family hears this, I'll never hear the end of it, so it's White Sox.
Okay. They did win a championship,
Well, and it's
in
the
2000 something.
It's the Pope's team now too.
Yeah, the
so
Pope's team,
it's
for
a
sure.
good choice.
For sure. Now, does the family still live in Chicago, or are they closer to you now? Or
No, everybody's still back in Chicago.
Okay.
Yes, I'll easily jump on the Amtrak train.
Yeah.
And this is the closest.
I heard
I've
that's
ever
the
been
easiest
home.
way to go back and forth.
It's so peaceful.
Yeah.
It really is.
So get us into your story of actually joining the Air Force.
Yeah, what was the reason? Did you have military background with other family members? What drove you to do it? What was the thought process, and how did you do it?
The reason I joined the military was after I graduated from high school, I thought I had it all figured out. I was going to community college. I had 2 jobs, 19 at the time, and I just couldn't make ends meet. I was still living at home, obviously, and I just kept thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do something different, break the cycle? Traditional role in Latina background, normally you leave the house when you get married, you're ready to start a family, have children, and I wasn't ready for that. But I was ready to move on. I was ready for the next chapter. So I couldn't think of another way that would help me pay for college and do something different. And I just felt stuck. Back when I was in high school, I do remember seeing an Army recruiter. They were outside of the lunchroom. I don't remember seeing an Air Force recruiter. And I said, I'm gonna go talk to them. And I did it behind my mom's back. And I got through almost the whole entire process. Finally mentioned it to my mom. And you have to understand, as the oldest, as a Latina woman, being her right hand, it was the hardest decision that I had to make because I felt like I was leaving her behind. And she still needed me. There was language barriers. There was the culture change even after all these years. But I knew she would be in great hands with my sister. I just needed to do it. I just needed to take the leap. I mentioned it to my mom, and she said, the Army, you should really consider the Air Force. We have an uncle of mine that served during that time, and I say uncle, and it sounds like he's a lot older than I am. But he was really just 4 or 5 years older than me. And so I talked to him, and he talked me out of joining the Army, talked to the Air Force recruiter. And before you knew it, I would like to mention that taking the ASVAB test, my mom, we're big believers in faith, and she was praying that I wouldn't pass the ASVAB test because she didn't want me. That's just not ladylike. The military is not known for women, and she was just really afraid of what would happen. And I barely made it through. I didn't know that you could study. I went in there. I remember taking the ASVAB and, the mechanics section, the electronics sections,
Sure.
and I was like, what language is this?
I would have been right there with you.
So once I knew that I had passed the ASVAB,
Yeah,
so I guess
decent
you could
score
say
on it.
yes.
Yeah.
And I was able to join the Air Force, and it was over. I did all the paperwork, and it's all a blur from there. Next thing I know, I'm in basic training and talking to my parents or talking to my mom and the family.
How quick was that turnaround between signing on the dotted line and then getting to basic training?
The delayed entry program is what we call it.
Gotcha.
I don't remember that being very long.
Okay.
I don't remember.
You were a
having
senior
months
in
and
high
months.
school?
At that point, I had already graduated.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yep. I was a year out of high school.
Where was basic training for you?
San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
And I went in July.
Ooh.
And nobody
Ouch.
warns you about the heat.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than Chicago.
To tell you the least, when my mom and my sister family came to visit to join me in my graduation, they couldn't even recognize me in the bunch because I was so tanned, being out in the sun for so long. And
What are some things you remember from your basic training experience that stands out?
basic training was, at first, seemed pretty easy. You could hear a lot of the ladies crying because they were away from home, and I felt pretty strong in the beginning. And then there were some things, some errors or some mistakes that I made throughout my time that I felt that I was going to be pushed back, what we called getting recycled.
Recycled, yeah. So your confidence was starting to get chipped at a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the incidents that stick with me till this day is we were in our last couple weeks of training, and we were out, and I was holding my rifle. You know, obviously it wasn't loaded or anything,
Sure.
but I was holding it wrong. And this is after I ran to use the restroom, and they give you like 0.5 seconds to
Yeah.
get back, something
Yeah.
unrealistic. So here I am running with the rest of the people or the airmen that were in the same boat as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes the training instructors, the TIs, and they're yelling and they're calling someone, saying, "What are you doing? You're holding the rifle. You're pointing it towards your wingman." And that's like the absolute worst
big
thing you
no-no.
could ever do.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, can this person just fix their rifle? Like, come on.
Oh, man.
And they're getting closer and closer, and they're in my face.
Yeah.
And they grab that rifle and they throw it across the field. And they tell me, they give me a stick the size of the rifle. And then they say, you're going to use this through the rest of your time. And if you don't use it like your rifle, then you're going to get recycled. And my family had already bought tickets. Like, I could not
All the
disappoint them.
pressure.
So here I look like an idiot going through the obstacle courses with my stick and, you know, making all the noises. But then I just had to have fun with it and just go pew pew. And I shared this story with some of my students throughout my career, and they all laughed. But in the moment, it was scary as hell.
It's funny how situational awareness can just completely leave your body in
Yeah.
situations like that.
Yeah.
Funny enough, Lenore, I can commiserate with you a little bit here. There was a time in basic training for me that they rushed us, and some of us needed to use the restroom, and they had porta potties out on the range, firing range, and went to the restroom as fast as I humanly could, and left the restroom, and got in line, got in formation, whatever, went about our day. That night, I realized I'd lost my dog tags in the porta potty. I had been shuffling or something in the porta potty, and they had flung off my neck into the abyss. But anyway, so I know all about being
terror.
rushed. Yes.
And realizing you didn't have it right.
Oh, my gosh, it was awful. But anyway, so I can commiserate with you in that capacity. Tell us about the feeling that you had once you graduated with your family attending your graduation.
That was a huge milestone and accomplishment. My mom was so proud. You know, in the beginning, she didn't want me to go. But after seeing me standing amongst other women, other airmen, and being so proud of the country that has changed our life, and she still keeps all the things from you would think she has a museum
Sure.
in her where she lives now. She doesn't want me to get rid of anything, any uniform pieces, any of the awards.
She keep the
treats them-
program from the graduation?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
She's on that level. I got you.
It just felt so surreal. But to have my family's support that were there in person, and I know that my family that wasn't able to join me in person, having them support me and be behind me in this decision that was not easy at all, knowing that every time I came back home to visit, they welcomed me with open arms, with my favorite foods, and it's like we never skipped a beat. It just felt like home each time. And I was just so proud. I was proud because I felt that I was honoring them and what they came to this country for, and giving us a piece of that dream and reaching higher heights or going for anything that we can possibly dream of.
I always think this is a really interesting point in any service member's career, graduating basic training, because there's that sense of pride, almost indescribable sense of pride. So at that point, if you can think back, what did you envision your career was going to look like?
Oh, good question, Ethan.
I had no idea. I really had no clue. You hear about the travel, you hear, I'm thinking, honestly, what I'm thinking at that time is the rest of my career is going to be like basic training.
Sure.
And I said, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? I have to do 4 years of this because that was my enlistment.
Yeah.
And that was the plan. 4 years, I'm going to get my college education, get a little bit of experience, and then I'm out. But obviously that's not what panned out.
Well, just reading about you a lot, Leonor, in the past couple of days, I can tell you're very relationship-oriented. Did you happen to build strong bonds and relationships in basic that have carried on till today, or were those kind of isolated to that time frame? Or
That's a great question as well. During basic training, for some time I kept in touch with some of the ladies, but basic training, it's so different for the female flights than it is for the male flights. When I look back, I used to envy the male flights because they had a brotherhood, a bond that they created almost immediately. And for us, it was just so challenging. There was a lot of cattiness, a lot of competition. And I couldn't understand why we couldn't come together. We're stronger in numbers. And so I did not keep in touch with too many of them.
did you ever feel, and I don't want to impose this on you or anything, but did you ever feel any discriminatory things based on your background and who you were?
Yes. When I was going through basic training, I was what's known as the chow runner. That is the person that runs anytime that we are ready to eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You run down to the cafeteria. You are the head person. You go in, you ask for permission up in front of the snake pit, which is all the training instructors. And there's a whole reporting procedure. You don't look at them until you are being spoken to. And I did not look forward to eating at all. My stomach would go into knots. I would get so nervous because my whole flight was counting on me to walk really, really fast because I couldn't run to the chow hall to get us in line first. And I remember going in front of the snake pit, and because of the color of my skin, they would ask me to do everything in Spanish because it was humorous to them. And they were trying to break me out of character.
Sure.
That was their point. I didn't understand it at the time. I was just doing what I was told. And I thought to myself, okay, I need to say my whole reporting statement in Spanish, and on the fly, I did it. But I wasn't going to break in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, I will admit I saw things very similar to that when I was in basic training. Part of me really wants to scold drill instructors and drill sergeants for that kind of behavior, because I think it still happens. Something for their entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Something that
they thought it was the funniest thing.
Yeah. And for you, even though I'm not surprised, you did it and you did it well, I'm sure. I'm sure there was a sense of humiliation, even still. And they, in some way, they were trying to belittle you. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that stuff gets my blood boiling. Tell us about your first duty station after basic training.
I ended up in Dallas, Texas. So I went from San Antonio, Texas to Dallas, Texas. I had no idea where that was. And I flew in a very small plane. Again, coming from a big city, I was terrified on this small plane because I felt everything. And once we finally arrived, there was nothing there. It was a ghost town. There was no big buildings. The place that was popping was Walmart, which was a big joke while I was there. I didn't have a car. I couldn't get around. The closest big city was Dallas, about an hour and a half, 2 hours from there. So I was again stuck.
Yeah.
And I walked everywhere, walked to work, and just was really humbled once I was able to get my first car.
I forgot to ask this. What was your duty title?
And I didn't mention it. I came in as an administrator.
Okay.
So I did a lot of the admin work initially for the first few years, and then volunteered to become a recruiter.
How long did you do the admin work? How much of your career was spent doing that?
Admin work in total was about 12 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What types of duties did you have to do as part of that role?
There was, what I really enjoyed about it is that we could go anywhere. We could be part of just about every unit because you need that admin support.
Sure.
It was anything from working as an orderly room, was what we called it back in the day, and out processing, calendar management, task management as well, depending on what level you worked, whether it's squadron level, group, wing level, which I was able to work in all three. At one point, we were stuck in between comm squadron and knowledge operations, which is a more paper side. So it was a lot of that.
Did you feel as though that gave you a lot of general experience?
I do, because it taught me a lot about paying attention to detail, which we learn in basic training, but actually the paperwork, everything that goes in front of you, because it wasn't just mine. This was everybody in that unit.
Sure.
It could be about their pay, all these things.
You're responsible for a lot of airmen and airwomen.
And don't mess up their pay.
Yeah.
Right.
Pay and leave time. You don't want to touch that.
Yes.
What did you think of the speed, the pace in that admin shop? Was it something that took some getting used to? Was it something that you felt kind of encumbered by?
The pace was good. It was, at one point I felt like it was a little slower than I liked. I didn't feel like sitting behind the desk was really where I was meant to be.
Sure.
And so that's where the thought and the feeling started to come in as, well, maybe there's something else out there that I can venture out and try.
Yeah. That's you've answered exactly the way I was thinking you would. I was sitting here thinking about just our conversation thus far with Leonor and what I know about her from research. And I'm thinking she's not the kind of person that wants to sit behind the desk.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'm not surprised at all that was your thought process. You wanted to get out there and be active and do more.
Right.
So during those 12 years prior to becoming a recruiter, because I definitely want to get into that as well, tell me about any deployments or other duty stations that you were at within those first 12 years.
So I first went into admin for 8 years, and then we'll talk about my recruiting experience, and then I went back to admin, so that's where the last years added up. But my first deployment while I was at Dyess Air Force Base, I worked in the 7th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, and those guys and gals are a whole different breed. I enjoyed my time as an admin, supporting them, being able to deploy with them. As I sit here looking at a picture that I brought from Diego Garcia, was my very first deployment. And again, I didn't know where I was going.
Sure.
It's where I was called to go. And Diego Garcia being an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, it was unbelievable once I arrived and saw that there was really nothing there.
Yeah, you thought Dyess was bad. Oh, my gosh.
But the beauty, the water that was crystal clear, blue, see right through, it was incredible. I was used to Lake Michigan, where you see diapers floating around.
Stark difference.
Yes.
Tell us, I could hear about Diego Garcia for hours, but
yes.
Tell us a little bit about it. It is such a unique location in the world, and I think if you were to show somebody on a map, hey, just so you know, there's a military base here, no one would believe you. So tell us a little bit about your experience from Diego Garcia.
there was a lot of tents. They were Camp City, Tent City is what we called it. And we stayed, obviously all the females stayed in the female tents, stayed on, from what I remember, we had beds. We didn't sleep on cots. But everything you quickly get used to. The dining facility was nearby. Everything was walking distance, except if you wanted to get to the Navy side, then that was a bus ride, quick, easy bus ride. I thoroughly enjoyed the food. I wasn't used to eating mahi-mahi. I had never had it before. Going deep sea fishing, I thought it was the coolest thing. And as I was out there, I just couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe that I was there. And I just kept telling myself, this isn't going to be the end of my career, right?
So that sort of re-enlivened your hopes for a long career?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
How else would I have an opportunity like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity. But now you went twice, is that correct?
I did. I volunteered the second
You
time.
loved it so much.
No one's getting in my way. I'm going again.
And it was all within the same year.
Wow.
I said, I raised my hand. If nobody else wants to go, I am there.
Did you not have a sense of isolation while there? I'm kind of speaking for myself here. I would feel as though, I don't know the exact distance, but I would guess over 1,000 miles from any mainland coast.
Mm-hmm.
Was a sense of isolation something that you ever felt while there?
I did. But again, you kind of get used to that. If you want to feel like you're getting away, you jump on the bus and you go to the Navy side, and that's where the club is. And they do a really good job with keeping the morale up with the clubs and
excursions.
Right.
I was thinking that probably has to be the case. They have to give you service members something to sort of keep your mind active.
Because you said mahi-mahi, were you guys catching and eating your own fish?
Yes. And it was just the most delicious thing I've ever eaten.
Right out of the ocean, man. It sounds like it was amazing.
I remember one of the locals who would take us out there. He accidentally caught a small white shark, and he picked it up, and he banged it against the edge of the boat. And I was sitting there just confused and scared, like, what is this guy doing? And then he threw it back in the water. And he said, that way it didn't keep coming back, biting his bait, and just bang the heck out of it to confuse it. And
yeah.
Wow.
Like,
I'd never heard of that, but that's awesome.
You imagine somebody just manhandling a shark and wow.
They're probably used to it.
They're built a little different down there. So 2 deployments to Diego Garcia. Now within those 8 years, still within the admin branch, where else were you deployed to?
I also deployed to Iraq. This one was obviously a lot different.
I'm sure. Yeah.
That one I did not volunteer for. I was actually only 6 months post having my daughter.
Wow.
So at 6 months, as soon as I was eligible after being on a waiver, I had to turn her into my family, to my mom, my sister, my mother-in-law, who were my support system. My husband at the time was in Africa doing his own contract.
Gotcha.
And it was just the most gut-wrenching feeling of, here's my baby. I trust you for the next 4, maybe more months. And knowing that I was going to miss on those milestones.
Sure.
And, oh, by the way, I don't know if I'm going to come back, because obviously going to Iraq is not one of the safest places to go. And so when I think of Iraq, I think about that part of my life that I had to leave behind as a mom, as a young mom, and getting through the deployment with postpartum depression and not really being able to just speak to anybody about it, and just dealing with it the best way I knew how.
Did you almost feel like you had part of yourself still here in the States with your family and your daughter, and a shadow of yourself on your deployment in Iraq?
Oh yeah, I felt numb.
Yeah,
I did, because you can't help but not to feel guilty.
Sure.
As if it was my choice, but obviously it's not.
Yeah.
But she doesn't understand that.
Sure.
I was still, breastfeeding her at the time, and it was just such a hard time.
I can't even imagine.
And I mentioned being able to deal with those things where you feel numb and just relying on alcohol. And that's where I had already, I was a drinker, right? It was part of my social environment, the way I was raised. It was a party for everything. You're turning one, we're having a party. It was around me. But in those situations, I really did turn to alcohol.
As a coping mechanism?
Yes.
I'm glad you shared that. I had two questions that I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit, especially as a female, because, of course, Ethan and I don't know that experience at all. But when it comes to the mental health side of, and you mentioned postpartum depression and also being in active duty, did you feel supported by your leadership as far as the mental health side, or were you, I don't know if afraid is the right word, but were you timid in bringing that up or getting help, so to speak, because you were afraid of the repercussions? Kind of give us some feedback about that. And then also, I'd like a little bit of feedback from you about the cultural challenges. Being Hispanic myself, I know that in our culture, I mean, mothers and daughters are very close, and so are grandparents. And so kind of, was there any cultural things that were impediments as well as being a new mom and being deployed?
I did feel for mental health, I had some really great leaders that I felt comfortable when I felt that it was right to open up to some of the things that I may have been going through. But then again, you're exactly right. You fear that your career could end because of the help that you're seeking. It's going to go on your records. It's something that you hear quite often. And so I chose not to seek any type of help. There was many other things that I had gone throughout my career that I really wish that I would have, because it affected me so much mentally. Because if you imagine, just you're keeping all these feelings, all these thoughts bottled up. And then I mentioned drinking. That was my coping mechanism. If I had the resource that I felt that I trusted, where I can just talk to someone, I don't think I would have reached that level of depending on the alcohol to get me through those tough times. And so those were my thoughts on a lot of the things where I wish I would have gotten help, and I didn't, because I felt like I had more to give in my career, and I just didn't want it to stop because of something where I felt that I was weak. As far as cultural change, and you're exactly right, as a mom, leaving your child, I mentioned my mom. She did not want to give me up, right? She didn't want to give me up to the military. We have that special bond that even till this day, my daughter's 18. I feel that because of that small break, but very important time in her life, she doesn't remember it. And I'm very hard on myself for it, where I feel that it affected our relationship from that point forward. Because I felt like I was putting the mission first over and over and over. And even as my next chapter as a recruiter, I feel that I didn't enjoy my daughter's childhood as much as I should have. I wasn't there for her. And it all started from that deployment. And as she goes off to college, and now that I'm out of the military, I've made it my mission to be there for her in ways, teaching her to drive, and the flexibility of starting this nonprofit. I work from home, so being there for her when she really needs me. And we've gotten a lot closer, and I think I'm very thankful for that.
And she's pretty close to your mom too, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have my only female cousin, and my grandma's been gone for a long time, but they were, my aunt was never really gone, but they were just my grandma. I could see that relationship, how close they were, and I know that's so important. and I was close to my grandma too, but I know those daughters and those granddaughters,
Oh, yeah.
especially in our culture. So, mentioned alcohol. I don't want to drive any nails in it, but how were you able to overcome that and get the help for that you needed so that you could be the better version of yourself?
It actually did not happen until after my military career, after I retired. And a few things happened where that transition was very, very difficult. At first, everything seemed fine. I got a job working at Microsoft, which was great. I was getting paid really well, working from home. And it felt like that transition was just smooth. And then tech mass layoffs happened, and I was one of them. And then it just felt like I was right back to the drawing board. And I used that time for self-healing. I participated in a few retreats that are out there for veterans at no cost. And it really forced me to get into those topics and areas that I had not dedicated time for, such as thinking about, well, if I'm trying to be the best version of myself, what's stopping me from getting there? And as I visualize this person and the things that I want to do for our community, how can I break some of those habits that'll help me? And I just one day decided it was Dry January. I saw it on Facebook, and just I needed that because there was nobody around me that I felt that I can really rely on to help me get through it. And I didn't want to look for help. I didn't want to seem like that person that has a real problem and join these groups. And so I used January as a trial month. Yeah. And then it became February, March, shared it as an awareness with my community, with my network, and just was really excited about the person that I was becoming. To this day, I haven't looked back. I had tried to stop before and then just fell back to it, but I'm really excited to share that it's been over a year.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
amazing. I want to backtrack a little bit because I'm really curious to hear about your time as a recruiter, because one reason is you brought some memorabilia from your service, and you have some pretty special recognition from your time as a recruiter. So tell us about that.
Being a recruiter was my favorite time in my career. And I say that because I finally felt like I was in my why and my purpose while serving. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed being an admin, going to the deployments, but I finally felt like I had more control of what my work was directly having an impact. And I at first, I wasn't thinking about becoming a recruiter. I wanted to be a TI. That was my goal. And I was in Germany. There was a group of recruiters who were recruiting, giving a briefing about special duties. And I dragged my husband with me, and I said, I wanted to convince him, even though you hear about the divorce rates, those type of jobs. But I just really wanted to do it. Yeah. And here we are listening to the briefings, and then the recruiter recruiting recruiters came on, and I had never thought about it. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. You get your laptop, you get your car, and you go out and you get to talk to high school students and just share your story. Yeah. I was like, you know what? I think that's more like what I want to do. And my husband was on board, and I volunteered, and I got picked up. And it was a very exciting time for me. But then something very unexpected happened. I was stationed once again in Germany, and I brought a marathon medallion here because I was part of the Air Force Marathon. I was very active. Fitness was my thing, running a lot, and I injured myself. My calf muscle, something happened, and pushed through a PT test. Didn't want to ask for help. Sure. Didn't want to say I couldn't take the test at this time. Well, it was so bad that affected me where I woke up having a seizure.
Wow, boy.
And my daughter, the 18-year-old now, she was 3 years old, and she saw me going through the seizures. And at that point, I didn't know what was going on to my body, but I also was thinking, instead of really thinking of my health, I was thinking, oh no, I'm going to have this career path taken away from me because you have to get medically cleared to do that. And it just comes to show where my mentality was. I was more worried about my career than my health. And so I was in ICU for about a week, and my mom was called from Chicago. She flew out there, and it was very devastating because the way it was presented to my family was they didn't know if I was going to make it out of there. It was very sudden. My brain had swollen up. I had suffered from a TBI and neurological issues. I couldn't really walk. I had to use a walker, and it was just horrible. My whole life just went upside down. And that was the first time I started to have suicide ideations because I felt like my whole identity was shook.
At that point, you don't know if you're ever going to be healthy again.
Right. I don't know if I'm going to be able to walk normally again. I went from a marathon runner to now I don't know if I'm going to walk the same. And my leadership at the time, they were really looking out for me. They had me go on, show up in San Antonio. I was medically evacuated from Ramstein to BAMC in San Antonio, where they took care of me. And I showed up to my leadership in the recruiting unit, and I said, this is how you see me. You can tell because I wasn't wearing my boots. I wasn't in full uniform because I was still recovering. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm here to report for duty, for training, for recruiting. And they heard everything I needed to say, what was going on medically. And they could have easily just said, this is the end of the road for you.
You're not the right fit for this.
Right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to drive because of the seizures. There's so many things. And so all I remember telling them, you will not regret it. If you give me this opportunity, you will not regret it. And they did. They gave me that window of, okay, we'll send you to recruiting school, see how you do, and depending on that, we'll go from there. Recruiting school was a nightmare for me because, again, I was showing up.
You're still in the recovery
I'm still
phase.
In the recovery phase. And I just wanted this so bad, but I really needed to focus on me at the time and heal through everything that I had gone through. And recruiting school was so challenging. There was a lot to memorize, and I mentioned that I had gone through this swelling of the brain, and I had my memory wasn't the same anymore. But I pushed through it, thankfully, with the support of my sister driving me to training every morning, my husband. Again, that support system that I had was unbelievable. I made it through recruiting school, and at one time I quit. I told my instructor, I said, I can't. I was bawling. There's so many stressors. And he looked at me and he said, I see something in you, and you can do it. And that was the last time I actually quit and just kept pushing forward. So fast forward, made it through recruiting school, I recruited out of San Antonio. And during that time, I just wanted to help everybody. I mean, you need a waiver? That's fine. I will work with you. And my peers were looking at me like, why are you working a waiver? We have people who are perfectly qualified.
Why put in extra work
exactly.
for one person? Yeah.
Right. Because it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I believe in giving people a second chance. And I saw myself, my story, I saw myself in them, and they just needed that chance. And I was willing to do it.
What rank were you at this point in time in your career?
I went in as a staff sergeant.
To recruiting school.
To tech sergeant, yep.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm not surprised, Leonor. I know we've just met this evening, but I'm not surprised that you had the kind of drive and dedication to put in the extra hours for people that you saw potential in.
It's just like being an immigrant. Right? You need that chance. You need that.
Exactly.
You need that network around you. Yeah. You need someone to believe in you and give you a shot. I can see that in you.
I love it when, and I think Leonor's a picture of excellence when it comes to this. I love it when I see somebody paying it forward.
Yeah.
Tell us about the accomplishments as a recruiter, because you rank pretty highly in terms of Air Force recruiters, if I understand correctly.
I did, and thankfully, I just had the most, and I hope he's listening, because he was just a phenomenal leader. My flight chief, Sergeant Stott at the time, just treated me right as a human. I never felt that I wasn't doing enough, even though when he came and did his visits, I didn't have all my paperwork done because I was meeting with people so often. I neglected certain areas of my job where he could have easily gotten after me, gave me the knife hand, and made me feel,
Yeah.
super small. But he never did that. I always felt like he had my back. And that just made me want to keep working even harder. And my team was just incredible. They saw I needed help. We worked together. It was just such a fun time. We worked hard. We played hard. And that's why I say it was the most favorite time of my career. So I never really felt, even though it was very long hours, to hear that I was close to winning such an honorable achievement as top recruiter in the nation, or gold badge, which is the highest ranking percentage of the people that you enlist. I never saw myself. I never set it as a goal. I just worked, I grind really hard. What I saw my mom doing, what I saw my family doing on a daily basis. And I think I mentioned that people referred to me as the waiver queen. If they had somebody that needed a waiver, go talk to Sergeant Branch. She'll help you. And I was okay with that. And so that hard work and the contributions with my team really leveraged the opportunity to be named top recruiter. And at that time, I was out for Blue Suit, is what we call the top 10 to 12 recruiters in the nation. And then they named the top recruiter out of the group. Mm-hmm. And I was the only female out of the group. And I was sitting in the Air Force recruiters general's house. We were having dinner and a recognition, and they started naming off the citation, and I knew for sure that I wasn't going to get it. I was amongst such greatness.
Yeah. And
I was just kind of sitting back and just waiting for the name to be called. But as they were reading the citation, they mentioned she. And I was like, oh my
Looking
God.
around the room, I think that's just me.
And I was like, oh my God. Instantly, I just felt, I was just in tears. I just couldn't believe that they were naming me the top recruiter.
Wow.
After everything that I had gone through. And I didn't even get to really scratch the surface from the seizures and going through recruiting school and all the struggles. And it just, wow. I was just so humbled to earn that recognition, and still am.
Did you feel at that point all of those hardships and difficulties you'd gone through had made that moment worth it, that moment of recognition worth it?
Absolutely. As we mentioned, as a woman, the only female in the group, as a Latina, being able to be even the face of other women who are out there, who are looking, maybe just not top recruiter of the nation, but accomplishing their goals and just not giving up when you feel that you just can't. There are times where you can push through and being able to overcome with resilience and the right support, the right leaders, the right team. You can achieve such huge milestones.
So your last 4 years, you returned to the admin world. Tell us about deciding to get out after 20 years. What went into that decision?
My last 4 years, it was a tough decision because I had set myself apart as a recruiter, and then going back as a recruiter instructor. I was doing very well in the recruiting field, and it was a shock to many when I decided to go back to my career field because I chose to go back. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like they told me to, and they just couldn't understand. They didn't get it. You're leaving something that you've worked so hard for. And in my mind, I thought, well, I felt like I was being loaned into the recruiting field. And then that's the whole purpose of going out to a special duty, is to gain all this experience and bring it back.
Sure.
Bringing it back to your career field, bringing it back to your airmen, and share. And that was my goal. And I saw the difference immediately as I came back to the admin field. Just the way we worked together wasn't the same. And it was my mission to be able to bring some of those soft skills that I've learned into that, to build morale, to build teamwork. And it was great up until COVID hit. And that was the last couple years of my career. working here at Scott Air Force Base at Transcom, I told myself I was one of the few that was still showing up to work. That was mission critical. There was others that could have shown up, but I felt as if not only was it not fair, but I was missing on that time with my family where I should have been home. COVID taught me that you can lose life so suddenly.
Yeah.
And that's where it hit me, along with my oldest daughter. When we moved, she was unpacking her things, and I'm thinking, this is another move. Got this resilience. You're a military child. You're used to this. And she just broke down crying because she had just left all her friends. She started in junior high. And I said, oh, man, if I have the choice to keep going or create stability for my family here, then this is where I'll hang up the uniform. So in conjunction of that and COVID, I knew that it was time, but it was a very difficult decision because I saw myself making E9. I dreamed of making E9, and I had so many people, leaders around me who said that they could see me making chief, and I felt like I was disappointing them by not trying. But I had that conversation with my leaders who I looked up to the most, and they were like, no, please, no, don't think about it that way. And it almost felt like I had that reassurance from the people that I admired that I was going to be okay.
Yeah, it's also powerful to make hard decisions that are beneficial for those around you.
You have so many accomplishments, Lenore, and it's almost difficult to fit all the things I want to ask you about in this interview. I really want to hear about your experience with Operation Red Wings Foundation and Women's Veterans Leadership Program. And then finally, I want to hear about the Women of Valor Honor Flight that you recently participated in. I'm giving you a whole list, I'm sorry. And then finally, I want you to be able to have space and time to talk about Pivot with Purpose, your pilot program through SIS. So I gave you a lot. I'm so sorry, but please, one by one, tick through the list I gave you.
Okay, as I'm writing my whole laundry list out. Operation Red Wings, that is a retreat that I found through my healing journey that I mentioned, and just using that time of, okay, what's next? Visualizing, okay, I have to work on myself first before starting that better, greater version of me. And so I saw that as an opportunity for veterans, and there was specifically for women veterans to be a part of a retreat out in Texas. I applied, I was accepted, and that was my first aha moment of a retreat. Now I had to obviously fly and then drive to the location, and as I was sitting there, I was taking it all in, and I knew that this would be so beneficial for other women veterans going through the same transition, if not healing journey. I thought, why am I flying all the way over here, taking a whole day? We could have this in our backyard in Missouri. We have so many great places. But I didn't know of any organizations that offered that. And so that was the start of, okay, we're onto something. I would love to see this in my community. After that, I saw an opportunity to be part of the Women Veteran Leadership Program. A friend of mine who had shared her journey, and I saw, man, getting together with a bunch of women veterans across the nation, which I've never experienced. I think I would really love to be a part of that. I applied at the last hour, the last day, because I didn't believe that I was worthy. I didn't think that I had enough to bring to the table as a woman veteran. I had just recently transitioned, and all I could put on there was, I worked at Microsoft, I got laid off. I now work at the YMCA as a fitness coach. That just didn't seem like enough for me. Really taking for granted my 20 years of experience.
I was about to say, several pages worth of experience.
I hear that a lot with veterans, is that
they almost don't know how to explain what they did, and so they just don't do it.
Yeah, even, and I don't mean to take steal the show here, but even my recent experience with the person that I've hired in my own industry was almost not hired because they couldn't translate that stuff. And I am so glad and happy and proud that I was at the right place at the right time to give that person an opportunity, and it panned out exactly the way I thought it was going to pan out.
Good.
But yeah, that's your story is so true, and we just need some better ways of getting, educating veterans that leave the service on how to write a resume that's going to translate to the corporate world, and we need the corporate world to understand that and be able to translate that themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so with WVOP, Women Veteran Leadership Program, through the Mission Continues formally, now it's through the Beneath the Service, going through that program, I went from a timid, very humble, not outspoken. I mean, I waited to the last day to be able to raise my hand and use the mic, use my voice, because I just lacked that confidence. And now I am an ambassador for the Women Veteran Leadership Program with Beneath the Service, which is something that I applied for and didn't know if I would get picked up. But it's just incredible how I went from not even believing that I would get accepted for the program to now as an ambassador and on this podcast. I think it's an incredible journey. Most recently, we as Sisters in Service Greater St. Louis, the nonprofit that I've had the pleasure to create with the help of other women veterans, we met up with the first ever Women Veteran Honor Flight here in St. Louis. It was the 111th mission, and it was unbelievable. It was on June 12th, Women Veterans Recognition Day, and I never heard of Women Veteran Recognition Day until recently in the last couple of years. And I've heard a lot of back and forth about what that day even means. Some people think that it's another Veterans Day, and they don't approve of it. But they lack to understand that it's the history of women veterans and how everything that we've gone through to be able to serve in the capacity that we serve now. And I just love learning about it. And so June 12th, not celebrated or not recognized in all states, Illinois being one of them, but it took me some time to, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about our history, where we come from. So that's what Women Veteran Recognition Day has done for me. But to be there for Honor Flight as Sisters in Service, it was 15 of us. We were all wearing something that represented our service as a veteran. And these women that served from different eras, Vietnam, Iraq, Korea, and to see them come back from their flight in D.C. being honored and recognized, we were all standing there holding our salute. And as they exited the flight, entering the terminal, one by one, and we were holding our salute, and all I could think was, don't cry, don't cry. And as soon as I could say it, I could feel the tears already flowing. Yeah. And I'm looking at my other Sisters in Service. Yeah. She's across from me and to my left, to my right, and I'm looking at them, and they're trying to hold it together. Yeah. And then it's just, now you've got me into this ugly cry that I'm trying to hold back. But that feeling of, I wasn't just saluting someone who served. That's legacy. Mm-hmm. They have paved the way so that I can serve, and so that the women with me and that are coming behind me can continue to serve. And that was just such a special moment, and we all felt it. The different ages coming together in sisterhood, that's what it's all about, is uplifting each other. There was some ladies who arrived from the trip, part of Honor Flight, who didn't have family there at all. And so they asked if we were willing to greet them, and we're like, yes. We made signs, and we cheered for her. She was crying. She was in a wheelchair being, chaperoned by another volunteer. And that's exactly why we exist as Sisters in Service. We
to be the family
together.
when it's needed.
Yes, to welcome. We welcomed her home, and to cheer each other, uplift one another, and be community for our women veterans.
I want to give a shout out to Sarge, Helen Keverick. She was on that honor flight. She was the ambassador, actually. Anyway, it's an
Awesome.
episode I recommend checking out. She's a fantastic lady. The last thing I wanted to ask about was the Pivot with Purpose program.
I really appreciate you asking me this because I did not want to forget to talk a little bit about one of the newest initiatives that Sisters in Service is launching here in September. We, as women veterans, on the board, so women veterans serving women veterans, and that is not just exclusive to women post-service, but it's also inviting women who are currently serving. And we put our minds together, and we thought of what do we wish we would have known as we were exiting the service? What is that space? I found myself a lot of times sipping coffee by myself and thinking, what was I going to do next? If I had a group of women, it didn't have to be a large group, but where we can talk and have these conversations, I think that we can definitely help each other out by sharing resources with each other. And that's what Pivot with Purpose is having that network, those topics, starting off with a few financial peace, mindfulness, transitions, and ending it with the retreat, which we talked about, Operation Red Wings. And we're teaming up with Team River Runner, which is bringing you out to paddle through, healing through paddling and out in the rivers. I've done that a couple times, terrified because I can swim, but that serenity and that peace that comes with being out in the rivers and taking all of that in and just taking women out of isolation also is one of our biggest things, is building this community together. We think that will reduce the gap in women veteran suicide rates, which I did not realize is twice as high than our male counterparts, which is devastating. So what do we do? And that is our answer to our local community, is building community together.
Love that. Can you tell us a little bit about when this is going to launch in September? Can you mention the dates again?
Oh, yes. So we are starting on September 5th that weekend. Some sessions are in person, some are virtual. The first will be in person. That is going to be our meet and greet. We're bringing women veterans who have already made that leap into the civilian sector, who are successful, so they can share their stories. And also just, like it says, meet and greet, meeting the rest of the cohort. And from there, we are doing virtual sessions. And then last, in-person retreat ending on October 3rd that weekend to the 5th, a big celebration. Welcome to this side and being that light at the end of the tunnel.
How do female veterans get involved in this? How do they find you? How do they get in contact with the right people? Give us some information on how they contact you guys.
Yes, we are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Sisters in Service Greater St. Louis would love to talk to anyone who would be interested. Our email address is on there. Reaching out through any of those platforms, you will see our flyer already there. There is an application process. We are limiting it to 15 women. So whether you are currently transitioning out of the military or you've been post-service 5 years is our cap. And where we're really trying to meet women where they need this information the most.
Absolutely. And we'll put that information in our show notes so people can link to it. I mean, this has been a wealth of information for me. It's been a sincere pleasure, the transparency that you've had, the openness, the dialogue. I personally feel a connection just based on our mutual culture. And it's I wouldn't say it's rare. I like to see people that look like me in the spaces that I'm in, and that is a little bit more rare than I'd like. So I really appreciate you standing out, stepping up, and being a beacon for the purpose of veterans and women veterans, but also from my perspective of the Hispanic culture in St. Louis. So I really, really appreciate you, and thank you for that. Ethan, any final words from you?
What I wanted to say is I want to echo what Jason said. I want to thank you for the service that you're continuing to do for your community. And there were times where I was literally at a loss for words during your interview, because it's not very often that we get to hear a female veteran who is talking about dark times with such strength and bravery. It's something I don't think people think about a lot. When you signed the dotted line, you did your first 4 years, and then you re-upped and you re-enlisted. You had a family. You had so many responsibilities on your shoulders, and you navigated it as best as you knew how at the time. And you've been so vulnerable about some misgivings, some regrets, some things you would have done differently. I'm a huge believer in everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think you are here with us. Jason and I have been graced with your life story for a reason. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. That really does mean a lot to be here and to share my story. I've heard the podcast, and those stories have really hit home for me. So it pays it forward, and I really do hope that today's discussion reaches at least one person.
It will.
It's definitely going to it's going to reach the right people. I always say that. It reaches at least one and the right people. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and sign off of the Operation Inside podcast from the MidAmerica Veterans Museum. Operation Insight is brought to you by the MidAmerica Veterans Museum. The museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. Do you like our podcast? With your support, we'll continue to bring you great programming. If you'd like to donate, go to mavm.org and click on Donate.